In our crane, it's the morning of Wednesday, 13th of December 2017. And this morning, it's quite a lot warmer than it was yesterday. The snow's melting, and unfortunately the sun's not shining. It's absolutely chucking it down with rain. It's just eased off for a second. But this morning, I'm down in Stansted Forest, on the edge of the village of Rowlands Castle, right on the borders of West Sussex and Hampshire. And I was hoping to do this morning's live stream from the edge of the UCOG well site, just a mile or so down the road here at Markswell Wood. Now, this is a relatively small pedal license area. It's Petroleum Exploration and Development License number 213. But this license area is quite possibly going to become very, very significant in the unfolding drama of the government's intentions to frack right across the UK. And as I said yesterday from Box Hill, although the south of England isn't blanket licensed like the north of England, there are pockets, particularly across the Weald, which runs from the Surrey-Kent border, right through the heart of Surrey, down into Sussex, and then across to West Sussex here. Now, this is a lone UCOG licence. It's pretty much surrounded by iGas licences, and we haven't heard very much from iGas in recent years. Of course, their stock is now well and truly in the toilet. They tried to salvage it a while ago by offering, I think it was 20 to 1, so refinancing effectively by trying to make the stock look more attractive. But it's just gone the same way, because obviously anyone with any ounce of nous knows that this industry is going nowhere, and to throw money in it, well, you might as well just throw it down the toilet, or go and enjoy yourself somewhere, because you're going to get a lot more return out of it than you are if you invest in iGas stock or any other stock associated with the unconventional gas industry. Well, iGas, of course, is also a company of interest up in Cheshire. And this morning, I'm going to make some observations, and I want to acknowledge the fantastic contribution of Ben Dean, who has done some outstanding research. Of course, it's Ben who initiated the judicial review against the government's extension of numerous pedals around the country without going through due process. A judicial review that, of course, the courts ruled in favour of the government. But, this is the way it has to go. You challenge one aspect and then you go to somewhere else. And, of course, this is why it's so important that we bring in people from all across the country, people from all walks of life, to bring the maximum amount of creativity we possibly can to find the Achilles heel that will effectively nail this industry once and for all. And it is Ben that I have to acknowledge has really done the research into the issues with this pedal, because this very much affects the Oil and Gas Authority. Now, I doubt very much whether many people had really heard or taken too much notice of the Oil and Gas Authority until it raised its head really about a week or so ago, after Greg Clark's department, the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, announced that it was going to have to close a loophole in the Infrastructure Act so that it could actually bring well sites like Kirby Misperton into its jurisdiction. Because as it was written, apparently, wells such as Kirby Misperton, which were drilled in 2013, were not actually covered by the Infrastructure Act, and therefore, in theory at least, Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy in North Yorkshire, could have gone ahead with that frack. But fortunately, they didn't realise it. Of course, they'll claim that they were doing the right thing and, going through due process, even though they weren't actually covered by the Act. But of course, that's a crock. The reality is they didn't realise it, because if they had, they would have just cracked on. Anyway, that loophole has now been addressed. But coupled with these issues, these loopholes, was the fact that Greg Clark has been desperately looking for a way in which he can effectively get out of making the decision regarding whether or not the fracking of the well at Kirby Misperton actually goes ahead. And bear in mind that that kit has now been sitting on that well site for well over 5 weeks, standing dormant, apart from running the pumps to circulate the water in the sub-zero temperatures, but lying dormant, waiting for the go-ahead from Greg Clark. But Greg Clark, being a very ambitious politician, just doesn't want to have his signature on the bottom line. So he's been looking for a get-out option. Well, after the amendments were put before Parliament last week, it seems that Greg Clark has effectively delegated responsibility for signing off on the Kirby Misperton well site to the Oil and Gas Authority. Now, a lot of people make assumptions about a quasi-government department such as the Oil and Gas Authority. One suspects that it's actually a government department manned by civil servants and effectively answerable to the Secretary of State. Well, some of that may be true, but the reality is that the Oil and Gas Authority is no more part of the British government than, say, the Federal Reserve is part of the American government. In fact, it's no more federal than Federal Express, or the Bank of England is part of the government. It's a private bank, and has absolutely no relationship with the government other than it issues money into the British economy and then charges interest on it. It's a private bank set up to look like a branch of government. And it's the same with the Oil and Gas Authority. It is a public limited company, and it is registered as a public limited company. And let me just see if I have the information right here at my fingertips. No, wrong page up. But check it out for yourself. This will become very apparent because I think that the story I'm about to share with you right now is about to blow big time. And no doubt Ruth Hayhurst will be running an article on this. So if you're not already subscribing to drillordrop.com, I suggest you do so that you literally get the almost up to the minute updates on what's occurring in the unconventional gas industry. So the Oil and Gas Authority is a public limited company masquerading as a government department. And as I suggested a few days ago, the Oil and Gas Authority has no interest in protecting the environment. It has no interest in the health and safety aspects of this industry. It certainly has no real desire to get involved in issues such as an extremely crowded frack pad at Kirby Misperton without an effective emergency plan or evacuation plan in place. And what is it, a telephone tree to the villagers in the event of a major incident? Well, the Oil and Gas Authority wants nothing at all to do with that. The Oil and Gas Authority's primary motivation is simply to take care of the interests of the oil and gas industry. And let me just have a look here. The Oil and Gas Authority's objectives, the process for oil and gas development plans. The process aims to review aspects of the field development plan that relate to the Oil and Gas Authority's principal objective, which is to maximise the economic recovery of UK offshore and onshore oil and gas, and to identify those aspects on which the views of the Oil and Gas Authority and licensees may diverge. So there you have it in words of pretty much one syllable. The role of the Oil and Gas Authority is to promote and push for the exploitation of hydrocarbon resources offshore and onshore in the UK. So don't think for 1 minute that this quasi-government private limited company, sorry, public limited company, has any real respect for the local community, for environmental issues, for health and safety issues. It's pushing the agenda And, you know, the players, I mean, look at the leadership team of the Oil and Gas Authority. And let me just have a look at the advisory board here. The Oil and Gas Authority Advisory Board. Now, the board of directors is headed up, as a chairman, is Sir Patrick Brown. And what do we find out about Sir Patrick Brown? Sir Patrick Brown held various positions in the Department for Transport and the Department of the Environment, becoming second permanent secretary and chief executive of the Property Services Agency in 1990. He was permanent secretary of the Department for Transport from 91 to 97, and he's also currently a director of Camelot UK Lotteries. So there you go. I mean, pretty much jobs for the boys. Well, the chief executive of the Oil and Gas Authority is a guy by the name of Dr. Andy Samuel. And Dr. Andy Samuel joined the Oil and Gas Authority as chief executive in 2015. He previously held senior positions within the oil and gas industry, including 20 years with BG Group. The last 2 as managing director for Europe Exploration and Production. Well, BG Group, which is part of the spin-off from British Gas some 30 odd years ago, well, BG Group is the company that owned QGC, the Queensland Gas Company. So it's BG Group that is actually responsible for the mess, the environmental disaster that is now well underway in southern Queensland, where an area the size of the UK has been fracked with over 20,000 wells since 2006, where large tracts of the Darling Downs and right across southern Queensland are effectively no longer usable for agricultural purposes. And the reason that you're not hearing about it is because in most cases QGC, the Queensland Gas Company, has effectively paid people off to remain silent. And you know, when I was out there, and it's pretty much 3 years ago now since I came back from the tour in Australia, and where I took the opportunity to go into the Gasfields and film the footage that became part of Voices from the Gasfields, which of course you can find online or on my YouTube channel, the Ian R. Crane YouTube channel. Well, the reason that I was only able to actually show Brian Monk, David Monk, and John Jenkins and his family is because these are the only 2 families in southern Queensland that were prepared to speak with me on camera. I spoke to many other families, but in most cases they have taken some compensatory payment from QGC, and part of that deal is that they cannot share their thoughts or their views on anything associated with any of the problems that have occurred as a result of QGC fracking the bejesus out of southern Queensland, and of course contaminating a lot of the aquifers that provide the water supply to the farmers there, and sucking the water out of the Great Artesian Basin at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. So that's the company. Of course, QGC is no longer owned by BG Group, I should hasten to add, because I think probably about a year ago now or so, it was sold to Shell. So, you know, BG Group have now divested themselves of that nightmare across southern Queensland and any future liabilities, and passed it over to Shell. So, just to put it in perspective, that's the guy, Dr. Andy Samuel, 20 years with BG Group, who now heads up the Oil and Gas Authority. So do you think for 1 minute that he's really, you know, going to give a second thought to the potential impact on communities of signing off for the fracking to start at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire? So this is the Oil and Gas Authority that Greg Clark is hoping to be able to hide behind if the permission to frack at Kirby Misperton is eventually signed off. Well, I'm sorry, Greg, but you're not going to get away with it that easy. It is your responsibility. You cannot delegate this responsibility to a public limited company, and certainly not a public limited company where the chief executive has a background of working with a company that has effectively been responsible for causing horrendous devastation across large tracts of southern Queensland. So, you know, I mean, there are so many similes that could be applied here, but, you know, this is not even poacher turned gamekeeper. This is the poacher actually still in the poacher's role, but as Lord of the Manor. So it's just absolutely absurd. Well, add insult to injury, what Ben Dean has uncovered is that the Oil and Gas Authority has effectively completely ignored due process, completely ignored prevailing legislation, and granted UCOG. Of course, UCOG was once upon a time headed up by dodgy David Lenegas, but fortunately he was run off out of the role of chairman after it was revealed that he had blatantly exaggerated the prospects of returns at the Horse Hill well, some 40 odd miles to the northeast of here. So he's still operating in the background, of course, but now this is the domain of Stephen Sanderson. And you know, there has not been any development plan for this area submitted by UCOG to the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, or certainly to the Oil and Gas Authority. And that is a fundamental requirement. A field development plan is a fundamental requirement before there can be any advancement of the industry in a particular area. So although they've drilled a well, got the core samples, there has not been any submission of a field development plan. Yet, the Oil and Gas Authority have quietly, it seems, decreed that this license area, Pedal 213, is now in production phase. And a production phase that will last until 2034. Now, that's only 17 years from now, but don't think for 1 minute that it's only 17 years, because as we've established, you know, right across the country, the oil and gas, the unconventional oil and gas industry has been negotiating 50-year lease arrangements with landowners. So if this does get a foothold here in the UK, this ain't going to be a bridging fuel. The dinosaur hydrocarbons industry, we're in the twilight years of the hydrocarbon economy construct before we move into something completely different. And as I've articulated elsewhere, we've never ever needed to use hydrocarbons anything like the quantities that we do. It's a construct, but that's for another time. But here we are in the twilight years of that economic construct, and yet the oil and gas industry in this country is looking to establish 50-year licenses with leaseholders, with landowners. And of course the British government is further looking to ensure, in fact one of the amendments made in the recent budget was that if an oil and gas company changes hands, then the new owners will benefit from the tax schemes, the preferential tax schemes, to allow them to prepare for when they do decommission. So in other words, you know, we clearly have, as we all know, a British government that is determined to support the oil and gas industry. So you know who's contributing massive amounts to the Conservative Party, but has committed its support to the oil and gas industry, despite the fact that countries everywhere else in the world are moving away from hydrocarbons as rapidly as they possibly can. So what are the Oil and Gas Authority doing by extending this license area and upgrading it to effectively a production area? They are stepping way beyond their authority, and either they have completely ridden roughshod over prevailing legislation, particularly the Petroleum Act, or they are ignorant of it. But either way, the Oil and Gas Authority is not fit for purpose. And please, you know, do your own research. Take a look at the other players on the Oil and Gas Authority. And of course, the Oil and Gas Authority would argue, well, of course we need people from the industry. We need people with industry expertise. But surely, if it's part of the regulatory control system, then the Oil and Gas Authority should have representatives, of course, from the oil and gas industry, but also environmentalists, health and safety specialists, representatives from the communities that are effective, or at least those people being co-opted. Because at the moment, this is not a level playing field. What we have with the British government, the BEIS, the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, and the Oil and Gas Authority, a public limited company, who, when things go pear-shaped, will just walk away, and then Greg Clark will say, well, it's nothing to do with me. It was the Oil and Gas Authority, and unfortunately they're now defunct. Ha, nice try, Greg, but this is being levelled at you. It is your responsibility, no one else's. You cannot dodge this political grenade, and it doesn't matter who you claim ultimately took the decision. It falls within your remit, and if your signature is on the approval giving Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy permission to start that frack at Kirby Misperton, and it goes pear-shaped, which it will, then it's your neck on the block, it's the millstone around your neck, and it's the end of your political career. So obviously my message for today is do your own research, as is always, and then contact your MP or contact Greg Clark and make them aware that the Oil and Gas Authority is not only not fit for purpose, it is riding roughshod over legislation that was put in place to protect the British people against cowboy operators such as Third Energy, despite the fact that Barclays Bank are behind them, Quadrilla, UCOG, iGas. These are cowboy outfits. No investor in their right mind would pump money into these companies. These are the domain of the penny stock investors. This time next year I'll be a millionaire. And obviously the guys who sell them this stock, they're on a 30% commission because they know it's junk stock, and they're targeting the retirees. They're targeting the guys who have got a little bit of savings and they want to make the best they can out of it, and they fall victim to these cowboy traders pushing this junk stock. Well, you know what? We have to make sure that those people are protected, and that my council, of course, is don't even go there. But make sure that these people are protected. They can get out while the going's good, and this industry gets shut down sooner rather than later. So I'm at Markswells Wood, well, just a few miles up the road at Rowlands Castle. And tomorrow I'll be back in the southwest. Tomorrow night will be another episode of Fracking Nightmare, and also Humanity vs Insanity. So 7:30 live on UK Column, Humanity vs Insanity, and 9 o'clock in the evening live will be Fracking Nightmare. But I will also be back tomorrow from somewhere in the southwest of England with another 8:30 AM live stream update. So thanks for joining me, and I'll catch you with you tomorrow. Take care.
Sorry, you heard your voice and you wanted to come over.
That's okay. You're welcome to carry on walking through.
Which way to go?
At least it stopped raining.
Yeah. And what are you up to?
Well, are you aware of what's occurring a little way down the road?
No. Oh, what, not the drilling?
Yes, exactly.